Hello, church. Hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to continue looking at Matthew chapter 10. Whenever we look at the Bible, and we've talked about this a lot at Lifesong, context is king. We need to always consider the context. So as a reminder of the context of this part of text, Jesus has gathered his disciples around him, and we're reading a charge that he gives to them as he sends them out to proclaim his teaching to the people of Israel. And so that's a bit of the context there. The section we read just before this talked about persecution, and Jesus was explaining to the disciples that it's not that they may experience persecution, but it's that they will experience persecution. And he leaves them with the note there on that Jesus himself was persecuted, and so it makes sense that the world would persecute them. We can actually kind of take persecution as a compliment, which is a weird thing to think, but the reality is that the ways of the world and the ways of God are contrary to one another. And so if we stand and promote and teach and live by the ways of God, it only naturally follows that the people who will follow the ways of the world will not be okay with that, and therefrom that's where persecution comes from. And so that's what this leads off from. We're reading Matthew chapter 10 verses 26 to 33. It starts by saying, "So have no fear of them," them being the people who will persecute you. "Have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, say in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. And do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both the soul and the body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs on your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I also will acknowledge before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before men, I will also deny before my Father who is in heaven." And so this section of text, it starts with Jesus telling them, do not be afraid. And he kind of makes this connection between fear and proclaiming the truth, because here's what can happen, and we see this a lot in our culture. In fact, in the current culture we live in, there's a term for it, and I hate this, but it's called cancel culture. And the idea is that if I say something that you or the majority of people do not like, you can simply say, and I think this is a very silly statement, but you can say full stop, and I am then supposed to just stop what I'm saying, stop what I'm doing, and don't bring it up again. And when it comes to the ways of God, I say absolutely not. Regardless of the criticism I may get, regardless of the poor treatment or persecution or anything that I may face for promoting the ways of God, I will continue to promote the ways of God all the time. And so Jesus says that do not be afraid, but rather proclaim the truth. He says this phrase of what you heard whispered, proclaim from the rooftops. And there's this idea there that Jesus gathered with many people and taught a lot of them. And then he also gathered the 12 and he taught them deeply. And basically Jesus is saying, those things that I taught you, that we once kept to this inner circle, as it were, now promote those to everyone, teach them to all people. And there's also this idea of when persecution comes against you, and do not be afraid, and do not allow the fear of that or a result of that to stop you from promoting it, but rather proclaim it from the rooftops. And you can think in the ancient world, that is how you talk to the masses. And so regardless of what the world may throw at us or treat us, we need to promote and teach and live by the ways of God and hold to them. He continues to say, do not fear those who can kill the body or harm the body, but rather fear the one who can destroy both the body and the soul. See, here on earth, a man could call me a nasty name. He could cut me or break my bones, and yeah, I could be killed by one. But that is the extent, that is the limit of what he is capable of doing to me. He cannot touch my soul. There's nothing he can do that will affect me eternally. And the judgment of God is a whole other thing. The judgment of God is something that will affect us eternally. And so you can understand that what the judgment is judgment I'm going to be concerned about. The judgment of men I could care less about. It's the judgment of God that I care about. So he says that there. He continues and he says that, a sparrow, which is pretty much worthless, two of them are sold for a penny. It's nothing, it's pocket change. But yet God knows when one of them falls. And he knows each hair on our head. There's this idea of God has an in-depth knowledge of you, and he cares for you. It says that we are of more value than many sparrows. If God is concerned and knows and cares when a simple bird falls out of its tree, how much more does he care for us? And so while we are to have fear of him and a fear of the judgment that he brings on us for our sin, we also understand that he cares for us greatly and he loves us. We kind of do this dance between love and fear, and the fear builds respect, and it's different than other fears we experience here in this world. Then he says that two statements. If you acknowledge me before men, I will acknowledge you before my Father. There's this idea that as persecution comes against the Christian, that we are to still stand for God, stand for his ways. And when we do that, and then judgment day comes and we stand before God and our life is laid out before him, Jesus will stand up for us and say, they are with me, they are covered, they are mine. But then likewise it says that whoever denies me before men, I will deny. And there's this other verse in the Bible where people come before God on judgment. They say, we did this, this, and this in your name. And he says, I don't know you. And there's this idea that we need to continue to stand for the ways of God, not allow persecution and the ways of the world to corrupt that, but rather continue to stand firm, and God will continue to be on our side and to be with us. And in judgment, we will be found righteous in his sight. That's Matthew 10, another look at it there. Hope you guys have a great week.